welcome. It's lovely to see you, Ian. Just a reminder that this is part of a growing younger piece of research looking at how we retain young people, particularly into secondary school, in our churches. And I've got Ian here, and Ian's just going to share a little bit with us. Ian, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your context, where you're based and what you do.
I can, yes. I'm based at the moment in Chidlow parish, which is St Mary's and St Cuthbert's. St Cuthbert's is the daughter church. I'm the curate, coming to the end of I've come to the end of my third year. We've got a fourth year to do. So I spend most of my time at St Mary's, go down to St Cuthbert's every now and then, and I'm one of the children youth overseers at the moment. And it's me, Jodie, my wife, and 3 kids who are here.
That sounds great, and such an exciting place to be. And I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit about the church itself and the impact that you think having a children and youth worker in terms of retaining young people as they grow up and go into high school from primary school.
I think the impact on having a children youth worker, or children's workers and youth workers, however it's set up, on retaining young people is huge. So we've got a children's outreach worker at the moment, Mark. I say at the moment, he's been doing it for decades. He's built relationships in local primary schools, and he knows families, and he runs the Holiday Bible Club, all things like that. Lots of different groups during the week. So relationships with the children and their families are key, because you're not just going to get to year 6 and say, by the way, church is really important. Now we need you to keep coming when you're in year 7. That's probably not going to work. So it's a whole life thing. That's why, because he started that at a really early age, introducing them to the Lord in sort of age-appropriate ways. There's Amy, the ministry trainee. She has only just started in September, but already with her help, we've been able to set up a Friday night youth group, which covers years 6 to 9. So obviously year 6 in there as well. One of the hopes for that is that we'll see the year 6s mingling with the older young people, so that when it's time to move up to the groups, they'll already know some of them. They'll feel a bit more comfortable. They won't feel like it's a huge gap to step over. And there's a group like that has been running on a Thursday as well at St Cuthbert's for quite a long time, that sort of brings those ages together, which is fantastic. Upon that, I should just mention volunteers, because there's a huge structure of volunteers underneath all of that, and it wouldn't be fair to imply that the paid staff do everything. We couldn't. So working with the whole family is really important when it comes to children, bridging that gap to secondary school and carrying on. We believe that parents and carers are the primary disciplers of their children. So Psalm 78 tells us to pass it on to the next generation, even to the children yet to be born, and they in turn will tell their children. Obviously, church can do that to some extent, and the youth work can do that, but the parents are that first kind of line of defense. What am I thinking of? The first people doing that during the week.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's easier said than done. Some parents are absolutely nailing it here, and an inspiration to me with my family. Some parents aren't Christian, so it can't happen at the moment. And then if your parents have never done it with you, then when it comes time for you to have kids, then you might struggle to know how to do it with your kids, because you've not had that example. So people are at all sorts of different stages. So what we want to do is help them, firstly, to realise and accept that that's part of their task under God, and then to kind of help them and support them to do it. So we've run partnering with parents evenings, which is basically where we all get together. We might have a guest in, people like Growing Young Disciples or Faith in Kids. They're brilliant groups. Or we might do it in-house, and we try and give the parents the tools to be doing this kind of stuff at home, getting the Bible open, praying with their kids, building their confidence that they can answer those difficult questions, or at least give it a go, or it's okay to say I don't know. Basically, we want people to understand that it's going to be messy, it's not going to be perfect, but then their children will grow up at the very least remembering Jesus was important in our house, and he was important to my parents, and maybe by now he's important to me as well. We want our young people to know that, and then just little things that we tried to do over the holidays or half term when kids are at home. Again, from Growing Young Disciples on Facebook, I got the idea of summer Bible buckets. So just got some cheap plastic buckets off Amazon, I think it was, and put all sorts of different kind of activities, a little Bible study that I wrote. We made a Spotify playlist of kid appropriate Christian songs and gave them a little QR code link to access that from home. Postcards to send us if they went on holiday and things like that. So we try and think of ways like that where we can help parents to do what they've been tasked with doing, but if they just don't really know what to do or where to start.
That all sounds really, really brilliant. How do you, I'm going to go off script a little bit here, Phil, I'm afraid. How do the parents respond to that? Do you, are they all in? Are they, some of them a bit more reticent? I guess particularly those who maybe don't have their own faith, or their faith is a bit different and less confident, as you mentioned before.
In terms of response to us trying to help parents in that way, certainly true that some parents of the youth who come aren't Christians, so of course they're not going to share that desire to or kind of the same understanding that we have about bringing their children up in the Christian faith. Some will have other faiths as well, so they'll actually be doing that at home, which is a strange sort of dynamic when the kids come to us. So it's not something that we want to kind of beat people over the head with and say, well, you know, Psalm 78 says this, so if you're not doing this, you know, you're an awful parent, what are you doing? Want to kind of say, and especially for me, I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's just chaos all the time from 6 a.m. until whenever they go to bed. And I think it's really important to be honest about that and to say you do what you can in the season that you're in, and the church will support however we can, however we have the capacity to do it. And unfortunately, if parents just they're not all in, even the Christian parents, some just kind of want to outsource their kids to youth work. Youth worker will do that. I don't think that's a fair pressure to put on the youth worker, but make the best of what we've got and try to help them to see that it's not a chore, although it may feel like that some days. Actually, discipling your kids is wonderful, and it's a huge privilege to be able to pass on your faith, if you've got one, to them and to see them growing in it.
Just want to ask you a little bit more about your team, because that's really important in your church. You've got a lot of volunteers, and how do you maintain that level of commitment? How do you encourage your volunteers in doing youth and children's ministry?
It has been difficult. It's difficult over COVID. Obviously, we're still feeling the effects of that, I think, in terms of some people who stepped back for whatever reason haven't stepped up again to the youth work. So it was tough. We did have, I think, to be honest, it's the result of decades of faithful ministry, helping us to understand what a gift it is to be able to serve Christ in that way, and people's hearts have been captured by that. I'm sure it's nothing to do with me. I've only been here 3 years. They're convinced both of the importance of passing on the faith to the next generation, and that actually, if they've got gifts, then they can step up and be serving and doing it. What we try to do, what we've been trying to do, is that when our young people get to a certain age, so kind of older teens, 14 plus maybe, a lot of them will cycle back and start helping out with the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, obviously, you know, appropriately kind of safeguarding and all that stuff, which is really wonderful to see, because they've got a heart to help as well, and they've been through it. They're a little bit closer. I mean, I'm old now, I'm 32, so when I to the 10-year-olds, it might stick and go in and things, but I remember being 10, I idolized 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. So when you've got them in the group living for Jesus as well, it's just so much more appealing. So in terms of volunteers, we're trying to do that at the moment, and obviously a lot of them are invested as well if they're a bit older, because they've got kids in the groups.
I think that is all so helpful to hear. I wonder if you think about one thing that you found you think makes a difference in terms of young people staying at church? What might that be?
Can I say two things that make a difference in terms of young people staying at church?
We'll let that. Yeah, we'll we'll allow you to.
The first one is quick, but it's the obvious one, but it's kind of, I wouldn't want to let it go unsaid. The big one thing that keeps people there is the Holy Spirit opening their hearts to Jesus. And I mention that because you can do all of this great youth work and social stuff, but he's the person that we have to introduce them to and pray that they'll get to know. That's the goal ultimately, that they'll meet with the Lord of life at whatever age they're at, and he'll open their eyes to how worthy he is, how worth it is to follow him, take up your cross, whatever that looks like for you, and step out in faith. So that's what we want. The opposite of the kind of, we'll let the children decide when they're older, that just seems like another way of saying we'll teach them by our actions that Jesus isn't important. If I was to be a bit cynical, we want to challenge them gently and appropriately. What do you make of him? We think he's glorious. What do you think? And that's what's going to keep them coming. Sorry, that was a bit long. Apart from that, it's relationships. I think that would be my answer kind of every day of the week. Children are part of the church now. We're a family. And if they're not treated like part of the church, if they're always in a separate room, or they're the church of the future at some point, well, I don't think you can really blame them for leaving. So we really want to build relationships across the generations. It's a joy to see 80-plus-year-olds with the creche kids. So my 3-year-old will regularly run to an older lady in church and sit on her knee, just because he knows her, we know her. It's all fine. Or he'll be wrapped around my legs at the front while I'm preaching, which is okay because we're a family together. They're not there to just sit and be quiet. So that kind of intergenerational relationship building is absolutely essential, I think.
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful, and thank you so much for the time that you've shared with us today and all your insights. We're really grateful, and I'm sure it's going to be an inspiration to many others. So we're going to wrap up now and say God bless and thank you.